Hello everybody and welcome to my channel Crop Science 6049. In our lesson today we are going to be looking at classification of plants. This is the first lesson on classification of plants of many lessons that are going to come. So by the end of this lesson you must be able to define classification of plants and give reasons for classifying plants, classify plants according to scientific classification with the main focus on families, classification according to use. So what is classification of plants? Classification of plants is the act of putting plants into various groups, categories to show some relationship. So plants are put into different groups or categories so that some kind of relationship is shown. And these groups or these categories, they've got some similarities, or plants in those groups or categories have got some kind of similarities in them. In crop science, plants are grouped according to scientific families, uses, morphology, life cycle, and habitat. And the science of plant classification is what is known as plant taxonomy. And plant taxonomy is the science that finds, that identifies, that describes, that classifies, and also names plants. And when it comes to the naming of plants, the naming uses a two-word naming system known as binomial nomenclature. And the first part of the name is the genus, and the second part is the species or the epithet. For example, in Brassica junicea, junicea represents the epithet or the species, and Brassica is the genus. And why must plants be classified in the first place? Plants must be classified, one, to get acquainted with the crops or to know these crops better. So that is a general reason why plants must be classified. And the second reason why plants must be classified is to understand the requirements of soil and water of these different plants. This point is linked to point number 1, because if you get acquainted with the crops, you understand them better in terms of their requirements of soil and water. Reason number 3 is to know the adaptability of these crops, to know the soils that are best suited to them, to know the temperature that are best suited to them, and also to know their general adaptability. Point number 4 is to know the growing habit of the crops. So crops within the same group or within the same class, they have got the same growing habit. For example, if you look at crops that are in the cucurbit family, these crops, they have the same growing habit. They are climbers or they crawl on the ground. The next reason is to understand the climatic requirements of different crops. Again, crops within the same class or within the same family, they have the same climatic requirements. For example, crops within the Brassica family, they require, most of them, cool temperatures. So crops such as cabbages, broccoli, cauliflower, most of them, they are grown during the winter time. The next reason is to know the economic produce of the crop, to know the part of the crop of which these plants are grown for. And plants within the same family, they are usually grown for the same part. For example, again, in the Brassica family, these plants, they are grown for their leaves or for their flowers. And in the legume family, the crops there, they are grown for their seed. And also in the grass family, the plants there, they are also grown for their grain. And also to know the growing season of the crop. This point is connected to the point that says to understand the climatic requirements of the crop. Crops within the same family, they require they require the same growing season. And lastly, to know the actual conditions required for the cultivation of the crop. Plants within the same group, within the same family, they usually or they generally require the same conditions for them to be grown. Conditions in terms of weather, climate, conditions in terms of the soil environment, conditions in terms of everything in general. So now let's look at scientific classification of plants. Scientific classification, it groups plants into a hierarchy from the kingdom down to the variety. And in this hierarchy, that is where we are going to see where families are placed. So for example, in maize, if we are going to classify maize under scientific classification, it falls under the kingdom Plantae, division Spermatophytes, subdivision Angiosperms, class Monocotyledon, order Poales, and family Graminae. Genus Zea, species Zea maize. Species maize. So maize is in the family Graminae. Excuse me. So let's look at the different scientific families of crops. There are a lot of them, and I'm not going to look at all of them. I'm just going to look at just a few commonly grown crops. So the first one that we're going to look at is the Graminae family, which include crops such as barley, rice, wheat, oats, sugarcane, etc. And these crops, they are grown for mainly for their grain, except probably for crops such as sugarcane. The second family is the Liliaceae, and this includes plants such as onion, garlic, chives, leeks, etc. These ones, they are mainly grown for their bulb and also for their leaves. We also have the leguminous family, and the leguminous family is quite a number of plants, and it includes field beans, lupine, chickpea, lentil, peas, etc. And they are grown for their seed, for their edible seed, and also they are also grown so that probably they can be used for green manuring because they are high in nitrogen, and also they have the ability to fix nitrogen into the soil. The next family is the Malvaceae, and it includes crops such as cotton, okra, hibiscus, etc. Next family is the Solanaceae, or the Solanaceous family. It includes crops such as potato, tomato, pepper, tobacco, and eggplant, and many other crops. Next family is the composite, which include sunflower, safflower, lettuce, etc. The other family is the brassica family, which include broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, Chinese cabbage, kale, and these crops, they are mainly grown for their flour in the case of broccoli and cauliflower, and also they are grown mainly for their edible leaves. Also, you have the chenopod, which has two main crops in there. The Swiss chard, which is usually confused with spinach, and we also have spinach. Then we have the next family, which include carrots, celery, fennel, dip, and parsnip. You may pronounce it in whatever way you want. And as you can see, these plants, they have some kind of similarities, especially when it comes to their leaves. The next, excuse me, we have the cucurbit, which include cucumbers, watermelons, pumpkins, squash, zucchini, and these plants, they are mainly grown for their edible fruit, and some of them, they are grown for their leaves in the case of pumpkins. Next, I would like to look at classification of plants according to use. And crops is well classified based on their uses, which include the following. We have food crops, and the food crops include cereal crops, mainly, or they belong to the Gramineae family or the Poaceae family, and they are mainly grown for their grain. And examples of crops in this family include maize, millet, rice, wheat, rapoko, etc. The second group of plants which are grown for their which are grown as food are legumes or pulses, and these plants, they belong to the leguminous family, and they are cultivated for their edible seed. We also have vegetable crops, and these plants, they are mainly grown for their edible leaves mainly, but we have others that have got edible flowers. So these plants that have got edible leaves, that have got edible flowers, and that also have got edible fruits. For example, we've got cabbages, we've got kale, we've got tomatoes. There are also fruit crops under the food crops, and these are mainly grown for the fruit they produce. For example, we have got bananas, we've got oranges, we've got pineapples, pawpaw, mangoes, etc. There are a lot of them. Next, under food crops, we also have root and tuber crops, and these crops, they produce tubers underground, where they store their food, and also some of them, they produce a root that can grow very big and be used as food. Under tuber crops, we have got a common example of potato and under root crops, we've got a common examples such as carrot and cassava. Next class under use are beverage crops. So these are crops that are used in the production of food drinks. For example, we have cocoa, coffee, tea, and kola nut. Then next we have oil crops, and these are crops that are mainly grown because their seed is very rich in oil, and oil can be extracted from this seed. Common examples that we have in Zimbabwe: sunflowers, peanut, groundnut, and cotton. However, there are others such as castor bean and seeds from brassicas. Right, the next classification under use are fiber crops. We have crops that are mainly grown for their fiber, and these are crops that are grown for their fiber, which is the raw material for the textile industry, and they are used for clothing. For clothing. They are also used for rope making and making of rugs. For example, we have cotton, we have jute, we have flax, we have sunhemp, we have sisal, and we also have kenneth. Next, we have plants that are grown for latex or for rubber, so that the sticky liquid that is obtained from them can be used to make rubber. Next, we have forage crops, and these are crops which are grown for grazing of animals, and they are used for making hay, making silage, and also for green manuring. For example, we have got basil, and we also have got clovers, and they mainly belong to either the Gramineae or the leguminous family. We also have sugar crops, which are crops grown mainly for the extraction of sugar. For example, we have sugarcane and sugarcane, sugar beet, and sweet sorghum. We also have condiment or spices, which are crops that are cultivated for the purposes of seasoning food. And these crops, they add flavor to food, and they also provide vitamins and minerals. For example, we have got turmeric, garlic, mint, chilies, ginger, and pepper. We also have medicinal plants, and these plants, they are mainly grown for or to serve as medicines. For example, we have got the common aloe vera. We also have crops that are grown for narcotics, or the crops that are grown for as drug crops. Excuse me. And from these plants, their extracts or tissues have a hallucinating or a calming effect to the systems of humans. For example, we have marijuana, which is now grown in Zimbabwe. We also have got poppy, we've got opium. We also have got coffee. We've got tea, and also peppermint. And also some of these are also used for medicinal purposes. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel so that every time that I post a lesson, you'll be informed. Also comment if you've got questions, if you've got additions, and if you've got something that you feel can improve the way I am presenting these lessons. Thank you very much.